So it can happen, but of course this is a fiction story.
But there are some elements of the truth. If somebody has a baby, and I think there was a woman that adopted a little baby, and then the baby started to change and show signs of a defect, and she wanted to give the baby back. So there is a commentary in society, how society is about looks, about how people look. Alrighty then, where were we?
He's 16. The top page 10.
Yes, he's 16. Oh, I beg your pardon. I thought you said 6 hours. You'll find a use department in the next aisle. Mr. Button turned miserably away. Another adverb. And I want you to look at all these adverbs. I want you to look at them. Would you say they're negative or positive? Very negative. Nervously, cuttingly, querulously, which is with a lot of complaints. Curiously, could be, this one could be both, but this one miserably. So things are getting worse and worse. You see with the adverbs that they're being used, and that's another technique by the author, by F. Scott Fitzgerald. So he turned away miserably. Then he stopped, brightened, and pointed his finger toward a dressed dummy in the window display. There, he exclaimed. A dummy in this case is a mannequin. A mannequin at the store, they have those dummies.
The dolls.
Yeah, they're called mannequins or dummies. So at this point, he's getting so desperate, he's pointing, I want that. I want to buy that. Mr. Button turned miserably away, then he stopped, brightened, and pointed his finger toward a dressed dummy in the window display. There, he exclaimed. I'll take that suit, out there on the dummy. The clerk stared. Why? He protested. That's not a child suit. At least it is, but it's for fancy dress. You could wear it yourself. Wrap it up, insisted his customer nervously. Again, nervously. That's what I want. The astonished clerk obeyed. Astonished, surprised in a negative manner. He's like, wow. Back at the hospital, Mr. Button entered the nursery and almost threw the package at his son. So he went to see the son, his baby, and he just gave him the clothes. And this is what the suit looked like. There is a picture here of kind of what it was supposed to look like. And the sad thing about it, if you see, here's what he's wearing. And see, he looks like he's older than the father. And again, he's all of the emotions coming about. Astonished clerk, nervous customer. Back at the hospital, Mr. Button entered the nursery and almost threw the package at his son. Here's your clothes. He snapped out. The old man untied the package and viewed the contents with a quizzical eye. Do you understand quiz as in a test that you take? So quizzical eye, like is with a question mark.
Yeah.
Quizzical eye. They look sort of funny to me. He complained. So he doesn't like the clothes. I don't want to be made a monkey of. And this is an expression from Old English. To make a monkey of is to make fun of somebody. To make a monkey of somebody. You've made a monkey of me, retorted Mr. Button fiercely. So he's, again, fiercely. He's getting angrier and angrier by the minute. He's not happy with this at all. Never you mind how funny you look. Put them on. or I'll spank you. He swallowed uneasily at the penultimate word, feeling nevertheless that it was the proper thing to say. All right, father. This with a grotesque simulation of filial respect. You've lived longer, you know best, just as you say. As before, the sound of the word father caused Mr. Button to start violently. And hurry. I'm hurrying, father. When his son was dressed, Mr. Button regarded him with depression. The costume consisted of dotted socks, pink pants, and a belted blouse with a wide white collar. Over the latter waved a long whitish beard, drooping almost to the waist. So this was a very long beard, drooping almost to the waist. The effect was not good. Wait! Mr. Button seized the hospital shears and with 3 quick snaps amputated a large section of the beard. So he just cut it because he couldn't look at it anymore. But even with this improvement, the ensemble means outfit, clothes, ensemble. The ensemble fell far short of perfection. The remaining brush of scraggly hair, the watery eyes, the ancient teeth, seemed oddly out of tone with the gaiety of the costume. Gaiety comes from the word gay. In the 1800s, the word gay was just happy. There was no homosexuality implied by using the word gay. You could say, oh, I'm so gay today, I'm happy. The gaiety of the costume. Mr. Button, however, was obdurate. He held out his hand. Come along, he said sternly. His son took the hand trustingly. What are you going to call me, Dad? He quavered as they walked from the nursery. Just baby for a while, till you think of a better name. Mr. Button grunted. I don't know, he answered harshly. I think we'll call you Methuselah, as in Matusalem. You know, the one that lived to be very, very, very old, Methuselah. Even after the new addition to the Button family had had his hair cut short and then dyed to a sparse, unnatural black. So they dyed the hair. They made his hair black to make him look a little bit younger. His face shaved so close that it glistened. It was shiny. His face was all shiny, glistened, and had been attired in small boy clothes made to order by a flabbergasted tailor. So the tailor was horrified to make baby clothes or boy clothes to an old man. It was impossible for Mr. Button to ignore the fact that his son was a poor excuse for a first family baby. Despite his aged stoop, Benjamin Button, for it was by this name they called him instead of by the appropriate but invidious Methuselah, was 5 feet 8 inches tall. His clothes did not conceal this, nor did the clipping and dyeing of his eyebrows disguise the fact that the eyes underneath were faded and watery and tired. In fact, the baby nurse who had been engaged in advance, they had already hired a nurse, and the nurse, they didn't need her anymore, left the house after one look. So she looked at this old man and said, I'm not going to work and take care. This is not a baby. So she left in a state of considerable indignation, more anger. Everybody's so angry about this baby. But Mr. Button persisted in his unwavering purpose. Benjamin was a baby, and a baby he should remain. So this is about society conventions. You have a baby, so you have to be a baby. Even though he was obviously an old man, but society dictates that he was born, he has to be a baby. So this is a commentary on society and how society treats people, that you have to follow the rules.
It's not only the society, though, it's the natural way.
The natural way, the chronological order of things.
Chronological order. So we're born as babies, not as old men.
So they're trying to follow this desperately. This is what Mr. Button, do you feel sorry for him at this point? For Mr. Button.
He has to pay so much trouble.
At first, he declared that if Benjamin didn't like the warm milk, so they went home with him, and the baby was to say, I don't want milk, I want food. If he didn't like milk, he could go without food altogether, so punishing the son already. But he was finally prevailed upon to allow his son bread and butter, and even oatmeal by way of a compromise. One day he brought home a rattle. You know what a rattle is? The thing that babies play with? They have the thing that makes noise. So they bought him a rattle. Do you think he's going to want to play with it?
No.
No. He knows what he is. Benjamin Button knows he's different. He knows he's not a baby. He's more aware than the father. He's more aware than the world around him.
He knows that he's different though. He knows that he is the boy that is born.
He knows that he's different. He knows there's something with him that's different. He doesn't want to be a baby because he knows that he's not like that. When he was born, he was put in a crib or crammed into the crib. He saw the other babies. In the United States, they keep all the babies together. So he looked around. He was the only old man. And he has a conscience of an old man. The personality of it, so he knows he's different. He knows there's something weird about him. One day he brought home a rattle and giving it to Benjamin, insisted in no uncertain terms that he should play with it. Whereupon the old man took it with a weary expression and could be heard jiggling it obediently at intervals throughout the day. So he tried to please his father. He wants to be accepted and loved, so he said, okay, I'll play with it. I'll play with it. There can be no doubt, though, that the rattle bored him and that he found other and more soothing amusements when he was left alone. For instance, Mr. Button discovered one day that during the preceding week, he had smoked more cigars than ever before, a phenomenon which was explained a few days later when entering the nursery unexpectedly. He found the room full of faint blue haze and Benjamin, with a guilty expression on his face, trying to conceal the butt of a dark Havana. So he was smoking cigars. See, he knows he's an old man. He knows. He's smoking. He was born with this already. This, of course, called for a severe spanking, but Mr. Button found that he could not bring himself to administer it, so he couldn't beat the baby. It wasn't a baby. He knew it. He was too aware. He merely warned his son that he would stunt his growth or make him stop growing. Nevertheless, he persisted in his attitude. He brought home lead soldiers. He brought home toy trains. He brought large, pleasant animals made of cotton, and to perfect the illusion which he was creating for himself at least. So he was trying to, he's a baby, he's a baby, he's a baby. He's trying to make him believe that this old man is a baby. He's the only one that believes this. The only one.
Where is the mother, by the way?
Yeah, that's something that everyone asks. In the movie, she dies, right? She dies in the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah, she dies. And there is a large puddle of blood on the bed. And I think this is just an opinion, that is an allusion to the fact that he was born an old man. He was very big. And this is probably why she died. Something. But they didn't have an old man. They had a little baby with the face of an old man in the movie. With CGI, obviously. And the mother is not heard of in the story. She's heard of in the very beginning, the Buttons, but she doesn't have a voice because it's a short story, and short stories have one focal point. So the focal point here is Benjamin Button and his story, and the father is a supporting character. He's the protagonist, Benjamin Button. The father is a supporting character, but there can't be too many characters in short stories. One focal point, very few characters, and no subplots. Because if you bring in the mother, you have to tell her story. You have to tell everyone how she's reacting.
Yeah.
So let's see, where were we? He's getting now large, pleasant animals made of cotton. He's getting all these baby toys. He passionately demanded of the clerk in the toy store whether the paint would come off the pink duck if the baby put it in his mouth. So he's trying to create an illusion for himself. But despite all his father's efforts, Benjamin refused to be interested. He would steal down the back stairs and return to the nursery with a volume of the Encyclopedia Britannica, so he could read already. More realismo fantástico, which is a genre of literature from Latin America, because it's this. How did he learn how to read? We have a lot of questions. How did he learn how to read? How did he learn how to speak? How come he was born with a personality form? But these questions are never answered in this fantastic realism genre. You just have to accept that these are the way the things are.
With all the instincts and the knowledge of an old man.
With the knowledge of, yes. But how? We don't know. This is part of the genre. Not knowing is a fantastic, out of this world, extraordinary thing, but is accepted as reality. That's why it's called realismo fantástico. Okay. All right, so he's reading the Encyclopedia Britannica, over which he would pore through an afternoon. So he would read an encyclopedia in one afternoon, while his cotton cows and his Noah's Ark were left neglected on the floor. Did you notice how many Bible references? Methuselah, and now they're talking about Noah and the Ark and the animals. What does this bring us? This brings us to God and how God created things and how God made the world. And how is this maybe commentary on how things should be in reverse? Or is it correct? Or should we believe these things? So Noah's Ark, they gave him Noah's Ark to play with, another Bible reference. Against such a stubbornness, Mr. Button's efforts were of little avail. So he was determined to stay an old man. He wanted to be an old man because he knew that's what he was. The sensation created in Baltimore was at first prodigious. What the mishap would have cost the Buttons and their kinsfolk socially cannot be determined, for the outbreak of the Civil War drew the city's attention to other things. A few people who were unfailingly polite racked their brains for compliments to give the parents. They didn't know what to say. They wanted to say something nice. And finally hit upon the ingenious device of declaring that the baby resembled his grandfather. A fact which, due to the standard state of decay common to all men of 70, could not be denied. Mr. and Mrs. Roger Button were not pleased, and Benjamin's grandfather was furiously insulted. Benjamin, once he left the hospital, took life as he found it. Several small boys were brought to see him, and he spent a stiff-jointed afternoon trying to work up an interest in tops and marbles. He even managed quite accidentally to break a kitchen window with a stone from a slingshot, a feat which secretly delighted his father, because the more he resembled the little boy, the more the father felt, okay, he's a young child. He's not an old man. Thereafter, Benjamin contrived to break something every day. He wanted to be loved. He wanted to be accepted. And don't we all? This is human nature. So although he was so different, he was like all of us. He wanted to be loved and accepted. And sometimes everybody does something that they don't really want to do, but they want to be accepted. At some point in life, we do this. All right, but he did these things not only because they were expected of him and because he was by nature obliging. Then when his grandfather's initial antagonism wore off, Benjamin and that gentleman took enormous pleasure in one another's company. They would sit for hours. These two, so far apart in age and experience, and like old cronies, discussed with tireless monotony the slow events of the day. Benjamin felt more at ease in his grandfather's presence than in his parents. They seemed always somewhat in awe of him. You know the word awesome? When you say something is awesome, something is wonderful and is surprisingly exciting. So it comes from a quality of awe. If it makes you feel awe, it's awesome. Awe is the actual sensation there. In awe of him, despite the dictatorial authority they exercised over him, frequently addressed him as Mr. They called him Mr. He was as puzzled as anyone else at the apparently advanced age of his mind and body at birth. He read up on it, so he was looking at information about it in the medical journal, but found that no such case had been previously recorded. At his father's urging, he made an honest attempt to play with other boys, and frequently he joined in the milder games. Football shook him up too much. He was too old for it. And he feared that in case of a fracture, his ancient bones would refuse to knit. When he was 5, he was sent to kindergarten, where he was initiated into the art of pasting green paper on orange paper, of weaving colored maps and manufacturing eternal cardboard necklaces. He was inclined to drowse off to sleep in the middle of these tasks, a habit which both irritated and frightened his young teacher. To his relief, she complained to his parents, and he was removed from the school. The Roger Buttons told his friends that they felt he was too young. Since nobody knew anything, they didn't show him off to everybody. So, oh no, he was too young to go to kindergarten. By the time he was 12 years old, so now he's 12 years old, his parents had grown used to him. So now everybody's used to the fact that he is different. Indeed, so strong is the force of costume that they no longer felt he was different from any other child, except when some curious anomaly reminded them of the fact. But one day, a few weeks after his 12th birthday, while looking in the mirror, Benjamin made, or thought he made, an astonishing discovery. Now, I want you to remember a few pages ago, the clerk was astonished in a negative way. But here, astonishingly, this astonishing discovery, this is a good thing. It's a good surprise. Did his eyes deceive him? Or had his hair turned in the dozen years of his life from white to iron gray under its concealing dye? So his hair is turning a different color. Doesn't look like an old man anymore. Was the network of wrinkles in his face becoming less pronounced? Was his skin healthier and firmer, with even a touch of ruddy winter color? He could not tell. He knew that he no longer stooped and that his physical condition had improved since the early days of his life. Now we can feel his aging backwards. He's becoming younger. Can it be? He thought to himself, or rather scarcely dared to think. He went to his father. I am grown, he announced determinedly. I want to put on long trousers. His father hesitated. Well, he said finally, I don't know, 14 is the age for putting on long trousers. And you were only 12. He's still he's in denial. Yeah. He's delusional. But you will have to admit, protested Benjamin, that I'm big for my age. His father looked at him with illusory speculation. Oh, I'm not sure of that, he said. I'm not sure of that. I was as big as you when I was 12. This was not true. It was all part of Roger Button's silent agreement with himself to believe in his son's normality. This was an attempt to feel normal, because this is how we are. There is in society, in the world, there's normal and there is not normal. So sometimes we're forced to be put in that box, in that category. And he was forcing himself to look at his son and see a normal young child. Finally, a compromise was reached. Benjamin was to continue to dye his hair, He was to make a better attempt to play with boys his own age. So they were going to do one thing for the other. He was not to wear his spectacles or carry a cane in the street. In return for these concessions, he was allowed his first suit of long trousers. And now we're starting chapter 4. Of the life of Benjamin Button between his 12th and 21st year, I intend to say little. Suffice to record that they were years of normal ungrowth. So he's not growing, he's becoming younger. They're calling this in the short story ungrowth. When Benjamin was 18, he was erect as a man of 50. So he went from 70 to 50. He had more hair, and it was more of a dark gray. His step was firm. His voice had lost its cracked quaver, old man voice, and descended to a healthy baritone. So his father sent him up to Connecticut to take examinations for entrance to Yale College. You've heard of Yale? Very important college in the United States, prestigious college. And there is a bit of a rift between Yale and Harvard. There's the Harvard people and Yale people. There is it's almost like Brazil and Argentina. Yeah. On the third day following his matriculation, he received a notification from Mr. Hart, the college registrar, to call at his office and arrange his schedule. To call at means to go to the place. It's not to call on the phone, but to call at is to go to the place. To call at his office and arrange his schedule. Benjamin, glancing in the mirror, decided that his hair needed a new application of its brown dye, but an anxious inspection of his bureau drawer disclosed that the dye bottle was not there. Then he remembered he had emptied it the day before and thrown it away. He was in a dilemma. He was due at the registrar's in 5 minutes. There seemed to be no help for it. He must go as he was. He did, without dyeing his hair. "Good morning," said the registrar politely. "You've come to inquire about your son?" So he assumed it was the father. "Why, as a matter of fact, my name is Button," began Benjamin. But Mr. Hart cut him off. "I'm very glad to meet you, Mr. Button. I'm expecting your son here any minute," he insisted. "That's me," burst out Benjamin. "I'm a freshman." "What? I'm a freshman? Sure, you're joking. Surely you're joking." "Not at all." The registrar frowned and glanced at a card before him. "Why, I have Mr. Benjamin Button's age down here as 18. "That's my age," asserted Benjamin, flushing slightly. The registrar eyed him. So you have the verb to eye, which comes from eyes, to look at somebody. You even have another expression, to eyeball somebody. To eyeball, to look at somebody and scrutinize them, to look at them and inspect them, to eye them. He eyed him. He looked at him, trying to look for an 18-year-old in that appearance. The registrar eyed him wearily. "Not surely, Mr. Button. You don't expect me to believe that." Benjamin smiled wearily. "I am 18, he repeated. The registrar pointed sternly to the door. "Get out," he said. "Get out of college and get out of town. You're a dangerous lunatic." "I am 18. Mr. Hart opened the door. "The idea," he shouted. "A man of your age trying to enter here as a freshman. 18 years old, are you? Well, I'll give you 18 minutes to get out of town." Benjamin Button walked with dignity from the room. So he had dignity inside of him, in spite of all this. And half a dozen undergraduates who were waiting in the hall followed him curiously, again that word, curiously, with their eyes. When he had gone a little way, he turned around, faced the infuriated registrar, who was still standing in the doorway, and repeated in a firm voice, "I am 18 years old," to a chorus of titters which went up from the group of undergraduates. Benjamin walked away. Now I kind of feel sorry for him. This is a sad part of the story. These are supposed to be the best years of his life when he's 18, but he's having such a difficult time. But he was not fated to escape so easily. On his melancholy walk to the railroad station, he found that he was being followed by a group, then by a swarm, and finally by a dense mass of undergraduates. Undergraduates are the people going to college. Undergraduate is when you are taking a bachelor's degree. A master's is graduate. An undergraduate is a bachelor's degree. It sounds very strange, undergraduate, but that's the form. You go from high school, then undergraduate, then graduate, if you decide to get a master's or a PhD. The word had gone around that a lunatic had passed the entrance examinations for Yale and attempted to palm himself off as a youth of 18. A fever of excitement permeated the college. Men ran hatless out of classes. The football team abandoned its practice and joined the mob. Professors' wives with bonnets, awry, and bustles out of position ran shouting after the procession, from which proceeded a continual succession of remarks aimed at the tender sensibilities of Benjamin Button. He must be the wandering Jew. He ought to go to prep school at his age. Look at the infant prodigy. He thought, this was the old man's home. Go up to Harvard. So you see, they're trying to make fun. They're in Yale, then go to Harvard. Benjamin increased his gait. Gait means walk. And soon he was running. He would show them. He would go to Harvard, and they would regret these ill-considered taunts. Safely on board the train for Baltimore, he put his head from the window. You'll regret this, he shouted. Ha ha, the undergraduates laughed. Ha ha ha. It was the biggest mistake that Yale College had ever made. Chapter 5. In 1880, Benjamin Button was 20 years old, and he signalized his birthday by going to work for his father in Roger Button Company Wholesale Hardware. It was in that same year that he began going out socially, meaning that he was supposed to start dating. That is, his father insisted on taking him to several fashionable dances. Roger Button was not 50, and he and his son were more and more companionable. In fact, since Benjamin had ceased to dye his hair, which was still grayish, they appeared about the same age and could have passed for brothers. So in the beginning of his life, he's hanging out with his grandpa because they're both the same age. Now he's hanging out with his dad because they look the same. One night in August, they got into the Phaeton, and Phaeton, you remember what it was? It's the little carriage that they had. They didn't have cars like we have now. They were different. Carriage with a horse. Phaeton, attired in their full dress suits, and drove out to a dance at the Shevlin's country house, situated just outside of Baltimore. It was a gorgeous evening. A full moon drenched the road to the lustrous colors of platinum, and late blooming harvest flowers breathed into the motionless air aromas that were like low, half-heard laughter. The open country, carpeted for rods around with bright wheat, was translucent, as in the day. It was almost impossible not to be affected by the sheer beauty of the sky, almost. There is a great future in the dry goods business, Roger Button was saying. He was not a spiritual man. His aesthetic sense was rudimentary. Old fellows like me can't learn new tricks. Have you ever heard the expression, "Oh, you can't teach an old dog new tricks"? Yeah. That's what he's trying to say. He observed profoundly, "It's you youngsters with energy and vitality that have the great future before you." Far up the road, the lights of the Shevlin's country house drifted into view, and presently there was a sighing sound that crept persistently toward them. It might have been the fine plaint of violins or the rustle of the silver wheat under the moon. They're trying to create a romantic atmosphere, so you can imagine what's going to happen to Benjamin Button now. If you've seen the movie, you might be thinking of something. It's about a girl. I'm skipping one paragraph, and I'm starting the paragraph where it says, the girl. The girl was slender and frail, with hair that was ashen, under the moon, and honey-colored. So now, all these descriptions, those are symbolic ways of making a romantic atmosphere. You don't say, oh, she had red hair. No, just saying ashen, under the moon, honey-colored, under the sputtering gas lamps of the porch. Over her shoulders was thrown a Spanish mantilla of softest yellow, butterflied in black. Her feet were glittering buttons at the hem of her bustle dress. Roger Button leaned over to his son. That, he said, is young Hildegard Moncrief, the daughter of General Moncrief. I believe in the movie they changed her name to Daisy. I'm not quite sure, but I think they changed her name. You know, there's always that person that says, oh, the movie was better than the book. Everybody that says that, personal opinion, I think that is just because they don't like to read. Because I always find more detail in the novels, in the short stories. There's more details.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I like Hildegard. It's more like, wow, than Daisy. It's just, Hildegard is more. Benjamin nodded coldly. Pretty little thing, he said indifferently. But when the Negro boy, see, Negro was appropriate in those times, not nowadays. Black people don't like to be called Negro. It's politically incorrect. But in these times when this was written, this was okay. Negro boy had led...
It was not considered as an insult at the time.
No, it was acceptable to say Negro. Led the buggy away, he added, Dad, you might introduce me to her. They approached a group of which Miss Moncrief was the center. Reared in the old tradition, she courtesied low before Benjamin. And you know what that is? She went like this, you know, like the girls have to do this. So it's proper to do that sort of thing. They don't do this anymore. They lift up their skirts nowadays and they twerk. All right. Yes, he might have a dance. He thanked her and walked away, staggered away. The interval until the time for his turn should arrive dragged itself out interminably. He stood close to the wall, silent, inscrutable, watching with murderous eyes the young bloods of Baltimore as they added around Hildegard Moncrief. Passionate admiration in their faces. So he started to get jealous, seeing the other boys are looking at her. How obnoxious. Obnoxious is an annoying, obnoxious. Although it's a word, it's quite an awkward word, but it's rather common to say somebody's, oh, you're so obnoxious. Shut up, you're obnoxious. How obnoxious they seemed to Benjamin. How intolerably rosy. Their curling brown whiskers aroused in him a feeling equivalent to indigestion. So he's sick with these feelings. But when his own time came, and he drifted with her out upon the changing floor to the music of the latest waltz from Paris, his jealousies and anxieties melted from him like a mantle of snow. This comparison here is a metaphor, a symbolic way of telling us how he's no longer jealous. It all melted. Blind with enchantment, he felt that life was just beginning, so he's starting to feel more alive. You and your brother got here just as we did, didn't you? Asked Hildegard, so she thinks his father is his brother, looking up at him with eyes that were like bright blue animal. Benjamin hesitated. If she took him for his father's brother, would it be best to enlighten her? He remembered his experience at Yale, so he decided against it. He didn't tell her. It would be rude to contradict a lady. It would be criminal to mar this exquisite occasion. To mar, to ruin. To mar this exquisite occasion with a grotesque story of his origin. Later, perhaps. So he nodded, smiled, listened, was happy. I like men of your age, Hildegard told him. Young boys are so idiotic. They tell me how much champagne they drink at college and how much money they lose playing cards. Men of your age know how to appreciate women. So he's using this to his advantage, because if she thinks he's older, but she's interested in him, more power to him now.
How old is she?
She's a young girl in her maybe 20s, 18, 20. Benjamin felt himself on the verge of a proposal. He already wanted to marry her. Love at first sight. With an effort, he choked back the impulse. To choke means when you... But he's not choking like that, but he forced himself to choke the impulse. He didn't want to propose now, not on the first date. You're just a romantic age, she continued. 50. 25 is too worldly wise. 30 is apt to be pale from overwork. 40 is the age of long stories that take a whole cigar to tell. 6 is too near 70. But 50 is the mellow age. I love 50. So now he's like, yes, I'm home now. 50 seemed to Benjamin a glorious age. He longed passionately to be 50. I've always said, went on Hildegard, I'd rather marry a man of 50 and be taken care of than marry a man of 30 and take care of him. For Benjamin, the rest of the evening was bathed in a honey-colored mist, another reference to her hair. Hildegard gave him 2 more dances, and they discovered that they were marvelously in accord on all the questions of the day. You see, the adverbs now are no longer negative. They're marvelously, so something good. So the story is getting better. Now he's starting to reach something positive in his life. Marvelously in accord. So they agreed in everything. She was to go driving with him on the following Sunday, and then they would discuss all these questions further. Going home in the Phaeton, again the horse carriage, just before the crack of dawn, when the first bees were humming and the fading moon glimmered in the cool dew, so all the descriptions are romantic, Benjamin knew vaguely that his father was discussing wholesale hardware. So his father is in the logical world and he's in the romantic world. And what do you think should merit our biggest attention after hammers and nails? The elder Button was saying. Love, replied Benjamin, absent-mindedly. Absent-mindedly as in daydreaming in a good way. So another positive adverb. Lugs, exclaimed Roger Button. He's talking about something in a store, and the son's talking about love. Benjamin regarded him with dazed eyes, just as the eastern sky was suddenly cracked with light, and an oriole yawned piercingly in the quickening trees. When 6 months later, chapter 6, when 6 months later the engagement of Miss Hildegard Moncrief to Mr. Benjamin Button was made known, I say made known, for General Moncrief declared he would rather fall upon his sword. Imagine this physically. Imagine a sword. And imagine falling upon a sword. How drastic, how horrible that would be. So he would rather die than announce the engagement. He doesn't want her to marry him. The excitement in Baltimore.
But it's not stated that they know
They don't know the curious case.
Yeah, no.
They don't know that.
So it's a matter of the age now.
It's a matter of physically, he looks too old for her. But in fact, they're about the same age. So that's the ironic part of it. There will be more irony towards this later on in a short story. The excitement in Baltimore society reached a feverish pitch. The almost forgotten story of Benjamin's birth was remembered and sent out upon the winds of scandal in picaresque and incredible forms. It was said that Benjamin was really the father of Roger Button. So people don't know the real story. They start telling different stories. Oh, I think this is that, and they start speculating. And the funny thing here is that they mention John Wilkes Booth. You see the name John Wilkes Booth? He's the guy who shot Abe Lincoln.
Oh.
He shot the president. He shot the president of the United States in disguise. And finally, that he had 2 conical horns sprouting from his head like he was a devil. This is a reference to the devil. They thought maybe Benjamin Button was a devil. The Sunday supplements of the New York papers played up the case with fascinating sketches, which showed the head of Benjamin Button attached to a fish, to a snake, and finally to a body of a solid brass. He became known journalistically as the Mystery Man of Maryland. But the true story, as it is usually the case, had a very small circulation, so very few people knew the truth. However, everyone agreed with General Moncrief that it was criminal for a lovely girl who could have married any beau, any guy, any beau in Baltimore to throw herself into the arms of a man who was assuredly 50. In vain, Mr. Roger Button published his son's birth certificate in large type in the Baltimore Blaze, which was a publication, like a newspaper or so. No one believed it. You had only to look at Benjamin and see. On the part of the 2 people most concerned, there was no wavering. So Benjamin Button and Hildegard were so in love, they didn't care what anybody said. So many of the stories about her fiancé were false that Hildegard refused stubbornly to believe even the true one. So Hildegard didn't believe that either. In vain, General Moncrief pointed out to her the high mortality among men of 50. In those days, people were dying when they were 50. Or at least among men who looked 50. In vain, he told her of the instability of the wholesale hardware business. Hildegard had chosen to marry for mellowness, meaning for the soft part of her heart. And marry she did.
But one thing that is in a way striking, or at least how I perceive it, is that before there was some astonishment in a negative way when he was young, in the beginning when they were at the hospital, but then there was no so much astonishment in the society. But now, because he wants to be part of the society, I mean in a more contacted way, with the girl, that all these rumors start.
Now the rumors are starting over something completely unrelated, the age difference, which ironically there is none. Chapter 7. In one particular at least, the friends of Hildegard Moncrief were mistaken. The wholesale hardware business prospered amazingly. In the 15 years between Benjamin Button's marriage in 1880 and his father's retirement in 1895, the family fortune was doubled, and this was due largely to the younger member of the firm. Needless to say, Baltimore eventually received the couple to its bosom. So bosom is the chest, your breast. So you think of when the baby is born, and this is another metaphorical reference. When the baby is born, you take the baby to your bosom. You welcome the baby, you comfort the baby. And at the beginning, they didn't welcome him, but now, eventually they did, when they became more normal. And, even old General Moncrief became reconciled to his son-in-law when Benjamin gave him the money to bring out his History of the Civil War in 20 volumes. You see how money talks? Yeah. There's another commentary on money and how money is so important. Now he bought the affections of the father-in-law because he gave him money to publish his books. Which have been refused by 9 prominent publishers. In Benjamin himself, 15 years had wrought many changes. It seemed to him that the blood flowed with new vigor through his veins. So he's now becoming younger and younger. It began to be a pleasure to rise in the morning, to walk with an active step along the busy sunny street, to work untiringly with his shipments of hammers and his cargoes of nails. It was in 1890 that he executed his famous business coup. He brought up the suggestion that all nails used in nailing up the boxes in which nails are shipped are the property of the shippee. A proposal which became a statute was approved by Chief Justice Fossil. And this could or could not be, F. Scott Fitzgerald is not alive for me to ask him this, but fossil, think of a fossil. What do you think of when you think of fossils?
They're old stones.
Dinosaurs?
Dinosaurs.
So you think old.
Yeah.
Right? So it's evoking that old age. Could or not be a reference to that. We can't ask F. Scott Fitzgerald. And saved Roger Button Company, wholesale hardware, more than 600 nails every year. In addition, Benjamin discovered that he was becoming more and more attracted by the gay side of life. He was not becoming a homosexual, he was just happy. But, that's where, and if you look at the word and how it evolved, and how Michael Jackson changed the word bad in 1987 when he came up with that, who's bad meaning, who is badass, who is tough, who's great. So he changed the word bad into something good. Sometimes people say, oh, that woman is badass. She's great, she's tough. So he changed that. And back in the day, the word gay only meant happy. And now it means something different. It was typical of his growing enthusiasm for pleasure that he was the first man in the city of Baltimore to own and run an automobile. Meeting him on the street, his contemporaries would stare enviously at the picture he made of health and vitality. So he was a healthy, vital young man. He seems to grow younger every year, they would remark. And if old Roger Button, now 65 years old, had failed at first to give a proper welcome to his son, he atoned at last by bestowing on him what amounted to adulation. Adulation is admiration. To treat somebody with a lot of respect, admiration, and to kiss up to them, to treat them extremely well. So he was finally treating his son with dignity. And here we come to an unpleasant subject, which it will be well to pass over as quickly as possible. There was only one thing that worried Benjamin Button. His wife had ceased to attract him. At that time, Hildegard was a woman of 35. Ooh, 35. Like back in the day, that was really old. But not now. Nowadays, it's very different. But back in the day, 35 she was old for that time. With a son, Roscoe, 14 years old. In the early days of their marriage, Benjamin had worshipped her. But as the years passed, her honey-colored hair became an exciting brown. The blue enamel of her eyes assumed the aspect of cheap crockery. Moreover, and most of all, she had become too settled in her ways, too placid as in calm, just sitting there, not excited about anything, too content, too anemic in her excitements, and too sober in her taste. As a bride, it had been she who had dragged Benjamin to dances and dinners. Now conditions were reversed. She went out socially with him, but without enthusiasm, devoured already by that eternal inertia which comes to live with each of us one day and stays with us to the end. Benjamin's discontent waxed stronger. At the outbreak of the Spanish-American War in 1898, his home had for him so little charm that he decided to join the army. With his business influence, he obtained a commission as captain and proved so adaptable to the work that he was made a major and finally a lieutenant colonel Even though it's spelled with an L, it's pronounced Colonel. Just in time to participate in a celebrated charged up St. Juan Hill. He was slightly wounded and received a medal. Benjamin had become so attached to the activity and excitement of army life that he regretted to give it up. But his business required attention, so he resigned his commission and came home. He was met at the station by a brass band and escorted to his house. We're almost done for the evening, and this is a sad note because now we're seeing that the situation is not as great for him. The beginning of chapter 8, you feel this. You feel Hildegard's side as well. Hildegard, waving a large silk flag, greeted him on the porch, and even as he kissed her, he felt with a sinking of the heart that these 3 years had taken their toll. She was a woman of 40 now, with a faint, squirmish line of gray hairs in her head. The sight depressed him. Up in his room, he saw his reflection in the familiar mirror. He went closer and examined his own face with anxiety, comparing it after a moment with a photograph of himself in uniform taken just before the war. Good Lord, he said aloud. The process was continuing. There was no doubt of it. He looked now like a man of 30. Instead of being delighted, he was uneasy. He was growing younger. He had hitherto means he had up to this moment, hitherto, up to this moment. You can use this word, but it's very fancy. So if you want to use it academically or in business. Hope that once he reached a bodily age equivalent to his age in years, the grotesque phenomenon which had marked his birth would cease to function. He shuddered. His destiny seemed to him awful, incredible. So at the beginning of the lecture today, you weren't here, but I'll tell you, I said, is this a blessing, something wonderful, or is it the curse of the devil to become younger as the years pass? So at this moment, how do you think Benjamin feels about it, if you had to guess? Look at that sentence again. Instead of delight, he was
Scared.
He was scared.
In the first moment, he's scared, but quickly he started to think how the situation can be good for him.
So maybe he'll find something good in it.
Yeah, I don't think he wants to go any younger.
He doesn't want to be any younger.
He wants to stay where he is.
He wanted to reach an age where it's more normal, and he calls his phenomenon grotesque. You think about grotesque as something very, very bad, and he was just beginning to enjoy his life, and he's probably foreseeing what's about to come. And I would like you girls to, if you have circled words and expressions and things that you want to ask about, we can discuss them now, because we'll finish reading the story on the 11th of December, on the second part.
We start at chapter 8 then?
Yes. So tell me what you have there in terms of questions. If it's a word which is not on the list that I made a list of my own with words. I'm not sure if you have. I have the words flabbergasted, septuagenarian, repugnant.
Have you noted which page is that?
No, not really. I just made a list of words in general. Do you have words that you made notes of?
In page 1, there is this expression for partner. It is antebellum.
Antebellum, and at pre-war.
Page 1.
This one? Before the war. That's what it's called. The period of time before the war. Well, period of time before the war. Pre-war.
And peerage, in that enormous peerage which largely populated. It's in the same page.
Let me see.
Page 1.
I think it is in the list as well. It's like a lot of people together. A group of people together. But it's more like they're all in the same class. They're all on the same level.
Cuff. Mr. Button said himself had been known for 4 years by the somewhat obvious nickname of Cuff.
Cuff.
It means something positive, probably.
It can be, you think of cuff as in you think of handcuffs.
Oh.
Think of cuff to cuff.
To catch.
Yes. So the catch. That would be like he was the catch.
The catch as
somebody
for a girl.
For a girl, yes. It could be.
Bosom in page 1 as well. Last word.
Bosom, the chest.
The bosom.
The bosom. So they bring this word. So that's a very good word for us to look at again, because the way it's used in the literature here, it's used right here. You have darkness of the night. Darkness of the night and new life upon his bosom. So you have night, you have darkness, you have a lot of negativity. Usually in literature, everything that's dark or the night has some sort of relation or connection to something negative. And this is when Benjamin Button came to this world in negativity. And it wasn't very easy for him. The very beginning wasn't very easy. It was more negative. But towards the end, when it was becoming good, at the point where we are now, he's feeling, he's scared, he's afraid. But maybe it could be something good for him. We'll see.
Yeah, but I understand something about this when, for example, about food and when he started to see what's different with another, and some situations are different about another child, and he think, for example, I want to take food or I want to do smoking, like the another person had the same appearance like me. Yeah.
So first he was in that, he didn't know where to identify. He's like, I don't want to play with the rattle, I don't want to drink the bottle.
Yeah.
I want to smoke cigars because it's more, it felt more natural.
Yeah.
And now he only wishes that maybe Hildegard could have stayed that age.
Yeah.
But it's really sad to see their
They're not in
relationship.
the same wavelength.
They're not. That's true.
And probably it was also due to
Hildegard.
Hildegard, sorry. It was her will to be with an older man, but and he wanted to be with a younger girl, which happens
Absolutely.
in everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
But when they meet, I guess they are okay, but then they start to go apart. It's sad.
But I maybe I don't understand it well, but still in the point to really stop. She don't have clear about this
the phenomenon.
Yes.
She doesn't want to believe it. Remember when they put the birth certificate? She didn't care. She was in love. She didn't care. And that's the cloud that was put in front of her face. And all the descriptions in that chapter talking about all the romanticism around it, because they couldn't see. He couldn't see either. He knew he was getting younger. He knew that there was something strange about, but he wasn't sure what was going to happen. He didn't want to stop and think about it. And she doesn't know or doesn't want to believe. We don't know. And the mother is nowhere to be found. And you notice that.
She's alive because they say the Rogers in some occasions.
In some occasions, yeah. But then if you watch the movie and you have that idea, then she's dead at the very beginning. And they took a lot of liberties with the movie. More characters, more subplots, and they brought an entire black cast. They had a lot of black actors.
Yeah.
This is done on purpose in the United States for box office purposes. There is a couple of movies. I Know What You Did Last Summer, the first one, a horror movie. And then people complained, oh, only white people in this movie. So when they made I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, they brought in 2 black characters. It's so deliberate and so obvious that they're doing, but it's American culture. So to make the movie, they brought in black characters. He is raised by black people in the movie.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
What I remember now. But he's raised by black.
Yeah.
But also the girl still, she hasn't reacted in a way to the situation, that she's there patiently being with him. We don't see any reaction until now.
Mm-hmm.
From her side, we see some reaction from him that in fact he doesn't feel attracted to her anymore. But she is like taking the role as usual, as expected in a way. She reacts as expected. To the natural way.
The natural, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. And it will get worse for Hildegard.
Okay.
I believe she was the one that lost the most, if you ask me. Okay, so you save whatever you have for the next term. I don't have any questions. It says no viewers yet. I had 2 people and then I had nobody. Because it's online as well. So whatever you have for the next time, and then you can finish reading at home, and the next time can be a little different. We can take on discussions and questions. And of course,
is it the whole short story?
You have the whole short story there. Yes, I think you have 42 pages in the small. Yeah.
That's that character with she was swimming in the sea between England and Germany.
Somebody swam?
Yeah, there was a girl that she wanted to swim a very long distance, a woman, and he met and fell in love. Benjamin. There is no character. It
wasn't a movie.
It was, but I guess there is no such character.
No, there isn't. And that's because for the purposes of a short story, it's not the length, it's the format. Yeah. We get to know exactly how he feels. We go all the way inside his thoughts and feelings and his heart. In the movie, the recourse that they have a narrator, which is him supposedly narrating his own story. So, but in the short story, we have a narrator who's an omniscient narrator narrating the story. He knows everything, but he's not a part of the story. So hopefully on the 11th, then you both can come back. on the 11th, and there might be more people joining us. There was somebody that was wanting to join us, but they're in Italy. I suspect that it said one viewer. It was probably her. And when it said two, it was probably my mother. I'm sure of it.
By the way, did you go to Toni Morrison? Or did you watch Toni Morrison? Because you said in November.
Oh, she's come. I'm not. Yeah, but she hasn't been. She hasn't come.
Oh, I thought it was in November.
Yeah, but she hasn't come, and I think it's because she can't really move about. She's in her 80s, so I don't think she managed.
She visited some universities. She's going to visit again.
That's what she was supposed to be doing. So maybe it has been postponed indeterminately. So we don't know exactly when, but
Okay.
I would love to see her. So let me see. 6 minutes ago, there was somebody in there. It was my mom. See if my mom has a question. Let's see.
Is it still here? Was it,
Hmm?
last time she was.
Oh no, she went back to Brazil.
Oh.
Yeah, so she's watching us there. Please wait. 1, 2, 3. It says it's on Ustream. And if for some reason you can't be here on the 11th, then you can still see it online. And I'm vigilant to see if there's questions. But there's, it's a new concept that we're going to be doing, but I decided that people who watch it online, they have less privileges. But it was just the 2 people this time. See how it is. But yeah, so the 11th of December, same time, same place.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to close the place today. So I have to be very careful not to forget anything. This was nice.
Yeah, thank you, Polyana.
Thank you guys.